National Fire Radio.
Hey guys, Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Welcome to another episode of Apparatus Innovations. Today we're talking about Heavy Rescue 22 out of the Stafford, Texas Fire Department. Joining me today is a friend and the Chief of Department, Larry Di Camillo. Larry, thanks for joining me, pal.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
You know, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to be able to sit down and actually take what we did with Apparatus Innovations and turn it into a longer form, say, podcast or episode where we can really deep dive into specific apparatus or just, specific design features and so on. And so tonight's episode 2, and you guys bought a commercial apparatus to service your community and your region for heavy rescue. And it's kind of a unique piece of apparatus. So I'm looking forward to diving in tonight and talking with you about it. But why don't you just give me the parameters real quick of what the apparatus is?
It's a commercially available, what most people would call a heavy equipment service vehicle that we happen to see driving through town. You see them all the time. We were in the market for looking to replace our rather plain and 20-plus-year-old rescue truck. And the idea struck us that, hey, maybe that would work. And so we looked at it from the cross-adaptability to our technical rescue responsibilities and thought that maybe having a limited capability crane would offer some extra value on TRT incidents.
And the crane is definitely the specialty part of this apparatus, right? And so did you have a crane on your existing rescue?
No, nobody in this region of Texas has a crane-equipped emergency response vehicle that we know.
So the rescue you replaced, just give me the rundown. What type of rescue did you have? And then what did you guys have to change up response guidelines and staffing and all that too with the introduction of this piece?
No, the old rescue truck was a 1999 Freightliner FL80 with an E1. I think it was an 18-foot box. Your typical, transverse compartments, 5 down the side, 1 in the back. Originally had a cascade system. We took it off. Once we committed to the county TRT team, we did a lot of makeshift adjustments to the compartments just to get it to hold the specialized equipment. And we really found that, we were headed down the road of just buying another one of those when the idea for this came up.
Okay. So then where did the idea come from?
Our chief of operations and myself were literally sitting at an intersection outside of our old admin building. And while we were sitting there, one of these heavy equipment service trucks drove by, and I said, "Hey man, what do you think of that?" And he goes, "That would work." And literally within 2 weeks, we were at a dealership forum up on the north side of Houston, and we said, "We like that." And it was nothing more glamorous than that.
Yeah, and so then so you guys are sitting there at the traffic light to 2 weeks later being in the yard. I mean, you guys you got the wheels turning, right? I mean, it's looking at how do we adapt a commercially available vehicle to the specifics of what this truck needed to do and the roles it needed to perform for you guys. How did that all come about in concept and theory when you start looking at such a change in type of apparatus? How did that process work for you? And say, did you have an apparatus committee? Was there conversation? Was there input?
Specific to this, if you go back to the genesis of our old rescue truck, it was back in the day where we had 3 stations, but we had 1 set of extrication equipment. It was on the rescue truck, but we have migrated and evolved since then. Every frontline rig has a set of extrication equipment, full set of Hamatro. And so the need for vehicle extrication on a single apparatus has gone by the wayside. With the advent almost 20 years ago of the Fort Bend County Technical Rescue Team, we started to get into specialized equipment, your pavement breakers, your lifting capabilities, your grip hoist, all the rest of the specialty stuff that you use so rarely. And we found that, you need a lot of space to carry that. But when you got down to it, with the way the team is composed with different disciplines and different equipment caches assigned to each of the 4 departments, ours really kind of evolved into the heavy lifting and specialized breaching and braking component of the team as far as our equipment cache. And so we were able to realize that our need for an infinite amount of compartment space wasn't there, although we had to factor that in. And then we also had to cross adapt not only the old rescue, but the new one to everyday purposes for our city. And so we had to make sure that we weren't getting a crane just to get a crane, that the crane was an ancillary benefit to a rig that would already do what we needed to do.
Right. You hit on something that I haven't really given much thought, but now that you said it, man, the bells went off my head is how we've evolved in the American Fire Service about going from one piece of apparatus, typically a rescue company that provided all of your vehicle extrication work, to now. I mean, I know like the bigger inner cities, urban settings, a lot of truck companies carried, a spreader and a cutter and maybe a set of airbags or something, and then followed up by a large complement of equipment on a rescue. But in more suburban communities, if you will, and rural communities especially, you always found that the one rescue truck was well equipped and every other piece of equipment didn't have any of that type of equipment on it. And now response guidelines have changed as technology has changed. Equipment's getting lighter. We can go to hydraulic, electric over hydraulic, things like that. It allows for us to operate in a much different manner than we used to.
Oh, absolutely. And what we found is, as we evolved and we grew from one set of extrication equipment, and that wasn't just out of, for no reason. That was just a call volume. And when you started looking at our manpower differential, being able to get a suppression piece on the road plus the rescue before we added part-time and now full-time personnel, it became something to where we evolved into rescue pumpers out of necessity, that whole, get as much as you can out of one rig. And then we just kept replicating it for each station. So in our particular case, all three frontline companies and the rescue company and the reserve all have their own set of extrication equipment.
Yeah.
And so, it's one of those things where that allowed us to really have the new rescue truck focus more specialty than on your more traditional carry everything on one thing, because it could be distributed evenly amongst the companies.
Yeah, it makes sense. Totally makes sense. And now also, right, to the caveat to all that then is when you can start getting specialized pieces now to complement the next step up in your tech rescue, that's where this truck comes in, right? Heavy Rescue 22, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It becomes a regional response tool also, not just localized, but, we should say that you guys are a bordering city or right outside the city of Houston. So it is a metropolis area, if you will, very dynamic. And yet that truck runs countywide, no?
Yeah. Matter of fact, last night, 19:30 hours, they got popped on a TRT run for a trench rescue. And they responded to the other side of the county with the rest of the four department county rescue team for a male subject trapped in a trench about 12 feet below grade. 3 hours and 2 minutes to extricate him, get him above grade, turn him over to EMS, who put him in a helicopter. So yeah, we go countywide, and that's what all the departments in the team do. And we've been all the way down into other counties or right on the borders with them to assist departments since they found out about our capability. And so it's one of those things where, our guys have a saying, have diesel, will travel.
Yeah, I like that. But that's also, and that rolls right into the funding aspect of this vehicle too, right? Because as we were talking, right, part of this conversation is to educate our municipal leaders, right? Whether it's a city, a suburban community, and a rural area. When you're looking at purchasing or going after a specialty type piece of equipment like Rescue 22, there has to be a conversation where you're looking at, I doubt that your own borders will allow for enough activity for such a unique piece of equipment. So you want to look outside your borders to offer assistance and response as well, correct?
Absolutely. And the way this came about, this was completely funded by Harris County and our precinct commissioner. We have a long-standing coverage agreement with Harris County. There's an area on the north side of our city between us and the city of Houston that's unincorporated Harris County. And so typically and historically, they've paid us X amount of money to cover that area. Back in 2013, we had to change that to where we needed to get something to increase our capabilities. There was limited water supply in that area, 2,000-foot lays from hydrants.
Right.
And so they actually bought us a tanker back in 2013 in exchange for covering that area.
So there's precedent right there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then Harris County Fire Marshal's office is key. They're the one that coordinates for the county. and our relationship with Rodney Reed and Lori Christensen, the fire marshal, is outstanding. And so we had a meeting, sat down and said, hey, look, our next step after the depreciated lease back on the tanker was coming due, we said, hey, let's look at this rescue truck option. We explained the benefits. We explained what we were looking at in terms of capability and the price point on it. So we basically looked at the NFPA guidelines for replacement cycles on these types of apparatus. So in exchange for them purchasing this vehicle for us, we are covering that unincorporated area for a 10-year period.
Yeah, and I think that is something that we have to look at more and more. This home turf thing just doesn't work really for anyone anymore. And so, to be able to put a specialty piece in service like this to facilitate a county-wide response is just, it makes sense. Frankly. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So you guys then also have to have, I know that this vehicle, through conversation with you, is oftentimes not staffed around the clock. If you have appropriate staffing, you might have some guys assigned to it, but overall it's across the floor from another company. No.
Yeah, exactly. Should we have sufficient personnel on duty, we will have 2 people on it. In the times that it's not with its own dedicated staffing, either Truck 21 or Engine 22, who it shares station with, will cross-staff it should a rescue response come in.
Okay, I gotcha. Which is imperative too, because with a specialty piece of equipment like this, you need people that know how to operate it, right? So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, like last night, your TRT run on a trench, right? On a trench run, you use the boom on your truck as the high point, right? For the rope system, right? I think what you have, like a 4-to-1. You said, I think you said.
Exactly. Yeah, we were able to position the operator. Everybody on Engine 22 is TRT. They jumped over. They responded with their suppression piece and the rescue.
Right.
Got on scene, parked the engine in the staging area, got back about 400 yards to the scene. And then the crew, all being TRT, went to work. As far as setting up the boom for the high point, it's added additional illumination down into the trench area where the worker was trapped. And we were able to use that, not as a lifting point, obviously, with the live patient, but to provide that 4-to-1 or a position to anchor that 4-to-1 mechanical advantage. So it could be a manual haul directly over the patient.
Yeah. So, that's just one application, right? This truck, like the more and more I wrap my head around it, look at pictures of it. You send me pictures, of it operating on highways, lifting vehicles up. Let's talk about it a little bit, right? So it's a 2020 Kenworth, and it's a 300 horsepower. It's Craneworks Incorporated, right? With a Craneworks 12,000-pound boom. It's got a 30-foot reach. The boom is located in the rear.
Correct.
Right? And so it gives you that, right? And then you have what, 2 downriggers on the rear?
It's got 1 downrigger on the chauffeur side and
Okay.
1 on the crane side extends. Yes.
Okay, got you. And so what is, creativity with this piece of equipment? You guys have used it now. I know you've used it on multiple runs within your own jurisdiction and mutual aid as well, but a lot of vehicle extrication, lifting vehicles over guardrails, vehicles in precarious positions to be able to position stabilization, things like that.
Yeah, we've only used the boom 6 times on incidents, only 1 in our city. All the other 5 have been mutual aid to other cities, including the city of Houston. Mo Davis, a friend of both of ours,
Sure.
Called it out the other night, actually up on Highway 59, just because the wreckers weren't able to do it. And our guys loved the opportunity to maintain proficiency. So they went over there and lifted a truck off the K-rail for him, put it down, shook hands, and went back in service. And so it's one of those things where, it's everything from we've used it to assist in lifting a box truck off of a car that had a fatality in it, to removing a deceased person from about 40 feet down off of a bridge into a rocky creek bed where a low angle rope evolution was going to be extremely precarious at night, to riding a vehicle with a 400-pound plus patient in it, to a number of applications. But it doesn't come down. What I want to emphasize is our chief of operations, Jose Magana, and myself, we could have a great idea and come up with this, but it took the guys buying into it and becoming good with it.
Yeah,
that really matters.
And talk about that, because with a specialty piece like this comes training.
Sure.
And the commitment from your department to provide that training, say for you, the chief of department, allowing and believing in the concept, and then allowing your guys to get the training necessary to operate such a important piece of equipment.
Well, sure. And it's one of those things, if you can try and find, a crane operator for the fire service class, please send me the email link. Because it's just one of those things where, we have a good relationship with our local towing companies.
Right.
But what they do is different than what we do. Theirs is typically, low extend, grab and go. And so we had to look at it differently. We had to make sure that they understood that we weren't there to take their toes, because there was some concern with that in the beginning.
Sure.
But we did a lot of lifting of concrete culverts, round objects, and that kind of stuff to get used to the different sling applications, the different ways that you attach them to the hook. Do we go 2-to-1 on the boom? Do we go one to, a single line haul with regard to if you need the extra range? Really dial it in on the guys and their estimation in terms of weight versus length. And so I'm extremely proud of how they've taken a great amount of pride in it. Of when they get there, they want to be relevant. And they want to be a benefit and they want to use it. And so when they show up, and they're going to be those guys that knows through everything else to get all the way up front. And there's pictures on our website of where they'll work the way between 8 other apparatus to get front and center, not just to be in the way, but to make sure that if they need it, it's there.
Yeah. And a couple things go along with that, right? With equipment like that, you want to be able to use it. Right. Guys go through all this specialty training. I know there's so many things that we train on regularly that we never use, but you got to stay proficient with it. But guys lose interest over time. That's just human nature. So it's nice. And then not only that, but then when you do educate your guys on how to use the equipment properly and it does start to get used, it's going to get used more and more because your neighbors and your mutual aid partners are going to see that you're proficient with this unique piece of equipment. And they're going to be reaching out and calling for you, even if they think that there might be a need. They're going to get you on the road prior to knowing they need you.
Perfect example was last night with the TRT. They didn't call specifically for Rescue 22. They called for the TRT team as a whole. But the way our team is composed, our commitment is that we're going to put the rescue truck on the road.
Right.
And so, within minutes of dispatch, they were already getting on 59 heading south towards the other side of the county, just because of the fact that that's our commitment. If it needs to be lifted, moved, or in any other way displaced, then that's kind of where our guys feel that they can bring a benefit to the scene. And if the boom offers that extra capability, so be it. But understand the genesis of the boom really wasn't the ancillary benefit was a high point. But what we actually found was we actually thought the boom would help us with material handling on those long drawn out incidents.
Yeah.
When you have trench trailers, when you have shoring trailers, it takes a lot of manpower to move those and unload it off the truck. So what we were thinking is that if anything else, it would help in the material handling of you can latch on to a couple, 5 or 6, 8 pieces of fin form and move it a lot easier with that boom than you could with a bunch of worker bee firemen. Minimize injuries, be more efficient, speed up the process. And it's just kind of evolved because now instead of that, it's never been utilized for that. It's been utilized as an actual lifting device. It's been utilized as a stabilization device. It's been utilized as a high point.
Right.
So, it's been in service about 10 months and we've already used the boom 6 times on different incidents.
That's fantastic.
So I think as it gets around more and more with the capabilities, we went on a PR tour, for lack of a better term. The guys in the different shifts, they would take it around to the neighboring departments, visit the stations and show them, hey, look, this is what we got. This is what we can do. These are our limitations because we can't expect to be called if we're not educated.
Dude, the PR tour is killer, right? I mean, you got to sell yourself, right? You got to sell your training. You got to sell your equipment so that people know what you have and how proficient you are with it. I love that. That's a hell of a heads up play. I love that. Let's hop into the commercial versus custom, right? I mean, so often in the fire service, we love custom apparatus. And, this is certainly a specialty piece, but I enjoy the conversation that it was as simple as sitting at a red light and seeing a heavy equipment service truck and going, that's exactly what we need. That conversation didn't get clouded by, well, let's call a dealer. Let's see who makes them. Let's design it ourselves. Let's over design and overbuild this thing for what we need. Right. So, you see all these heavy equipment yards, these cat mechanics, diesel mechanics, right? They run all these trucks. They have lighting on them. They got the boom on them. They have air. They got hydraulics. They got anything you want on them. It's a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we were actually in the process prior to seeing this truck driving by. we were in the process of designing a conventional replacement. We had been working with the dealers on different specs, different models, and the price point on it in a custom world, it's high.
Yeah.
And when you looked at, your cost benefit analysis of utilization versus cost, and then if you just define that by the number of runs it was going to make, it really fit that bill of being cost effective, filling a niche that the capability wasn't available in this region. And so it kind of came together to what is now being seen in hindsight as a great fit. And I mean, you're talking a $400,000 difference just in the chassis.
Well, that's it.
And so, and then that's before you even get to the body or the crane. And one thing I'd like to say is that this is in no way meant to be our version of LAFD,
Right.
San Andreas Heavy Rescue 3 or Miami-Dades or even Luthersburg, Maryland, who's been running cranes for decades.
Sure.
And, it's one of those things where this was bought for our niche application. And we're finding, quite honestly, that when this vehicle goes to get replaced, should the trend towards using it continue, we'll probably look at upsizing the crane or potentially doing a different application of it because there is a certain amount of versatility it offers.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think too often, we get wrapped up in the custom apparatus world. And like you said alone, over a $400,000 savings just on the chassis alone. I mean, when you start really putting that into perspective, and then you talk about a piece of equipment that's not being used daily and running out the door every day, right? You got to start looking at that and thinking, do we truly need, a custom apparatus to fill this niche?
Right. Oh, absolutely. And so when you looked at it, the biggest pushback, I say pushback questions that we've had about it is why a two-door chassis? Well, quite honestly, all the ones sitting on the lot were set up for that.
Right.
And when you looked at our manpower needs, our commitment to TRT, the way we're structured with the 4 cities, is that each department will put 2 people on the road with their equipment caches immediately. That allows us 8 people to start, immediate operations, supported by non-TRT personnel from the respective departments, providing those ancillary support functions. And then if you need additional personnel, that's when the recalls would come into effect. And so it fit that there. And then also knowing that our goal is to fill the seats on suppression apparatus because of the increased likelihood of use. And so the 2-seat chassis never really scared us away as being something that would work.
Sure. I mean, absolutely makes sense for sure. So so then the conversation then snowballs this way, right? We went commercial, off the lot, 2-door chassis. We took a truck that was sitting there ready to go. When we start talking about equipment, typically we build our apparatus for functionality, the equipment carried, and so on. How did you, I know we already touched on the fact that all your companies are carrying extrication equipment, so that's scaled back, right, from, say, a large heavy rescue company. But with this unique discipline now that you offer with the lifting capabilities and so on, you're looking at other types of equipment that maybe you never carried before that you have to start putting on this truck. So compartmentation becomes a big part of the conversation.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's still the baseline stuff because when it does have dedicated staffing and it is in service, it's making the medical runs in place of Engine 22. It's a more cost-effective platform to make those medical calls instead of a $756,000 rescue pumper.
Right.
But at the same time, too, it's got to have the specialized equipment on there. When we get to the compartment stuff, there's a lot of specialty stuff on there, from pavement breakers to 4 different types of saws and all the rest of that. But it's one of those things where, we wanted to orient it towards complementing the other equipment caches and not replicating.
No, it makes sense. I'm going through, we're going to, during the show, there's going to be a lot of these photos popping up throughout our conversation of the actual equipment and so on, and just looking. But you have quite the complement of equipment. So frankly, the commercialized body allowed for, and it looks like you still have room to grow with putting more equipment on.
Yeah. One of the areas that we gained a lot of potential storage is when we get around to the pictures, you'll look at the area in the bed. If you're looking at the back of the apparatus, that's typically an open dunnage area, for lack of a better term. We actually put a collapsing slidable cover on it. And so that's where our Stanley hydraulic power plant is.
Right.
Some wood cribbing and some shoring, as well as some chains and some other lifting adapters and devices. And so a lot of the big odd carry or odd size material that won't fit in a compartment is what went up in there. And we still have some capacity in terms of adding.
And that has a roll down cover. Is that weatherproof?
Yes. Yes, it is weatherproof. Yeah, it's completely slidable or collapsible. It's a 3-piece, and it just collapses back as you push towards the cab.
Got it. Nice. That's a nice setup. Yeah, I mean, just going through the pictures, I mean, it looks like you have rope equipment, you have heavy, you have pavement breakers, you have saws, you have power units. Talk about systems on the truck, air, hydraulics, lighting. What do you have? What do you have for power and so on?
Yeah, really, in addition to the crane that you mentioned, it does have a combined unit of a 7 kW generator, which also integrates an air compressor as well as a welder, should that be needed on a scene for a long duration incident if you're having to cut metal or whatnot. So that's on there as well. And then it does have an air reel on it for running air tools or manifolds remote from the apparatus. And so in terms of specialized systems on the apparatus, that's it. There's not a lot of other stuff. And that whole KISS theory of keep it simple.
Sure.
And it was one of those things where that was not added by us. That was a standard feature on that type of vehicle, which was another thing that kind of attracted us to it. And then, as well as I do, with the lighting capabilities of LED technology nowadays, you don't need these used generators like we used to need from the day.
Sure.
And those are all 12-volt floodlights, every one on there. And that last night on that trench, after the sun went down, that lit up a football field, plus the boom lighting and everything else. And so realistically, there's not a lot of specialized systems on it.
Yeah. And then, the other thing too, which I was just going to hit on, and I'm drawing a blank at the moment. I totally just blanked out on what I was going to, like last night, right? So you have that trench job last night. You're within 30 feet of the trench because of the boom reach to be a high point. So it's nice to be able to bring those systems closer to the incident, right? I mean, that's what's nice to have it all packaged in on 4 wheels, because you bring that up and that acts as a high point. You now bring that equipment right up to where it needs to be instead of staged, behind soil piles and everybody else.
Oh, absolutely. And actually that's what this one is. If you saw some of the pictures that I sent you, they were literally between the trench and the rescue truck was a spoil pile. But they went zero elevation eventually to reach over the spoil pile. We're able to put the boom and the block directly over the patient, form that high point for the 4-to-1 mechanical. And it just worked out. I couldn't ask for anything better.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. So what else? What did we miss? I mean, the conversation of specialty pieces, I think, I'm finding like in my region, we dove into like water rescue. And so our water rescue equipment has just been beefed up, whether it's high water trucks to boat caches to, hauling equipment, you name it, right? I mean, it's just that discipline for us has really exploded with all the storms we get now, the flooding, flash flooding in the roadways, things like that. When people are looking at designing and building out, because I know you're a very smart guy when it comes to apparatus. You and I've talked about apparatus at length, and I know that you do this on the side too, and we'll hop into that in a few minutes. But when departments are looking at going into specializing into a particular field, whether it's trench and confined space, the high angle, low angle, or water, points to consider when you're building out apparatus and equipment. Give me some pointers that maybe you came across during this project, or just 1 or 2 nuggets if you have them, that maybe people can take away as a talking point to make sure that when they're looking at doing a project like this themselves, they are hitting the bullets of the conversations that need to be had.
The 2 things that come to mind is just because it costs more doesn't make it better. Just because it's custom or somebody says it's a one of a kind or it's specialty for the fire service doesn't make it more functional, doesn't make it a bigger benefit to the community. Case in point, we all know the story, and I use the example of if you buy a cutoff saw, it's $800, but if you put fire rescue on the side of the guard, it's a $1,200 or $1,500 saw, and it's the same saw. And then the second one is that if it's mechanical, it'll break. So the fewer moving parts, the better. We've done the dance with complicated fire trucks, electronic valves and intakes and all the rest of that. They cost more to buy, they cost more to maintain, and they'll always break and let you down when you need them the most. And so and those are the 2 biggest things. Keep it simple, the fewer moving parts. If you can't use your hand to manually open an intake on a fire truck, you probably shouldn't be driving. in terms of just using the manual versus an electric valve. And just, if stainless steel works, you don't need a gold plated version. And so, I'm not a big fan of always having to have the fancy when something that may cost less is just as functional.
Yeah. Those are two really good points. I think the other thing too is too often I think we get wrapped up in thinking that we know more than we do. I'm guilty of it. I'm sure you are too. And so you got to be willing to have those conversations, right? Because when you start talking about narrowing in on a discipline or finding a task-oriented apparatus such as your Rescue 22, you should really have some outside conversations with maybe departments that use similar equipment. Or I mean, the ability now more than ever to reach out across the country to talk to people, because you just named off the top of your head 3 or 4 departments that run them, or something similar to that fashion. What this strikes me as is if you've ever seen San Diego Fire Department, their lifeguard rescue truck where they do the cliff rescues, that truck is super unique, built on a Pierce chassis, and they have lifting capabilities with a rear mounted boom like yours. And so there's departments that probably have already done it. And so, I just have to, throw that out there, that don't think that you know what you need until you at least start narrowing down conversations with people that have been there and done it before you. Because my last question for you about Rescue 22 tonight is things maybe you would consider to do differently, or things that in retrospect, because I know after every build, you get your engine, your truck, your rescue, whatever the apparatus is, comes in-house and you start dissecting it. And 3 months in, you go, man, I really wish we did this. Or this could have been done better if we knew this did this, right? Is there anything on this build that like stands out to you? Or moving forward, hey, the next one, I already heard you say the next one will probably go with a larger boom, right? And that's just through trial and error because you're realizing the capabilities of what it does. But is there anything that just stands out to you that you're like, hey, man, maybe next time we're going to do this? Or not?
Well, the input from the personnel has been, the issue isn't a commercial chassis. It's just the fact that it's a 2-door. So if we can afford the extra wheelbase and the length, I would,
right,
and we would entertain a 4-door commercial chassis just to be able to carry that. And then if we could extend the body by one more compartment to pick up one more compartment per side, and then obviously increase the capacity of the crane. This particular company makes a tandem axle version of this.
Okay.
And so where you do have that body that's essentially one compartment longer on each side, and they will put it on a 4-door chassis. So I think this was a learning point for us. And I think that would, and I think the crane actually is a little larger capacity. And so I think that that those would be reasonable things to look at down the road.
Yeah, nice. I appreciate that. That's good. It's good to be candid and talk about things that, considerations. But, here's the thing too. It's also a little bit of trial and error. When you get a new piece in like this, like you said, every day is something new. Hey, we could use it for this. Hey, we could, if we do this, we could do this with it now, And so those are those conversations too, where as you grow with the equipment, the possibilities keep growing also. And then you start to find those little areas where you could probably expand on it more greatly than you have.
Well, and we've already done that. We put it into service with a complement of equipment that it had. A lot of it was transferred over from the old. And then through the input from the personnel, we came up with a list of equipment that we needed. We were able to secure the funding for it, and we're in the process now. Just the day before, not yesterday, but the day before, there was a significant expenditure in additional hand tools and equipment for the fleet as a whole, but specifically Rescue 22, portable telescoping LED floodlighting that was used extensively last night. And so we've got about $15,000 worth of additional equipment that the personnel have formulated this list that we're in the process of acquiring now because it was identified by the personnel, and so you can't very well ask them to use it, but handicap them and not give them what they need.
100%, man. That's very well said. Very well said. Larry, let's talk about equipment, the cachet of equipment you do carry on Heavy Rescue 22. Why don't we start, since we have the officer side up, why don't we talk about that? Let's talk about the R1 compartment right behind the chassis, behind the cab, and then we'll work towards the back of the rig.
Sure. That compartment is going to be SCBA and basically storage space for the officer's equipment, whoever the secondary firefighter is. Strictly PPE. I believe we're also carrying ballistic protection in there, and some other things that unfortunately we need in today's day and time.
Yeah, and then the R2 looks like a Hamatro setup.
Yeah, that's the Gen 2 Hamatro Pantheon, cutter, spreader, and ram. We also have some DeWalt tools in there that actually have since been replaced with Milwaukee tools, just because we've migrated over because of the battery setup. It's really worked out well for us. And that compartment has going to have some additional equipment placed into it above where the Hamatro tool is mounted there on the back wall.
Got it. And then we have a skinnier compartment right behind it, which is the R3. It looks like your pavement breakers and then fuel or mixed gasoline on top.
Correct. Yeah, 2 pavement breakers that go with the Stanley system with the power plant that's carried elsewhere.
Okay. Over to wheel R4. What do we have? Saws?
Yep. We've got various cutoffs and chainsaws from masonry to concrete to utility use, just for whatever application TRT may find the need for.
Okay. And then the last compartment, it looks like an electrical reel down below.
Actually, that's an air reel that.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, by the air compressor to allow us to go remote. Plus, it's also got the outrigger controls as well as a remote control for the boom.
Got it. Okay. And that remote control for what?
The boom is
for the boom. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I thought you said boat, and I'm like, wait a minute. You have an inflatable on this? Which, if you think about it,
we've talked about it.
I mean, with a crane, with the boom setup that you have to be able to lower over the side of a bridge, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Well, if you look at FDNY's tactical support unit.
Exactly.
Chicago carries inflatable Zodiacs in their squads. NYPD's been running their ESU units like that. So, yeah, absolutely.
Good. Let's go to the rear as we walk around. So right now I'm looking at the rear, and you got your power plant up top. And then what else is carried up there?
There's a myriad of heavy rigging, chains, slings, etc., bridles, the Stanley hydraulic power plant, as you said, high pressure airbags, a lot of shovels, and just earth moving equipment for hand use. And then we still have some room there where we're talking about removing from another trailer that we have some additional chains for securing and lifting.
And as you said before, all of that is secured with a slide down cover and so on to secure it and to keep it out of the elements. All right, so here we are now, Chief Di Camillo, Larry. We're walking down. We came around the rear of the truck. We're now going to come down the driver's side. So the driver's side on the, what's that? The L5 compartment, the one closest to the rear. It looks like a lot of rope bags and so on.
Yeah, there's some pre-rigged lowering systems. There's 4 harnesses and everything else that we would need that would allow for an individual rescuer and victim or patient.
Okay. And then over to wheel well, it looks like you got EMS equipment and so on.
Yeah, there are some boxes in there that carry hoses for the lifting bags, control manifold, EMS equipment, cardiac monitor, that kind of thing.
Okay, and then the L3 compartment, the skinnier one on the other side of the wheel well, looks to be a set of struts.
Yeah, Paratech highway set just for larger capacity vehicles or to offer additional struts for the suppression apparatus.
Got it. And then the compartment next to it?
The compartment next to it is going to be all the various adapters and fittings, the different foot bases for the struts, tie-back straps for the struts, and that kind of equipment that if you don't have it, those are the ones you'll need.
Got it. And then the closest to the cab is, it looks like ballistic vests, helmets, SCBA, and probably storage for their PPE and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the top side real quick. We talked about the equipment you carry up there. There's some lumber storage, backboards, your power plant, a couple other things that are up there. But the job boxes that are up there too, kind of a unique feature. Talk to me about those.
Those were actually added during the design concept. We kind of realized we wanted to max out our storage capability because it's a finite size apparatus. And so those are 3 job boxes that instead of being permanently attached, they're actually have removable pins. So if you pull the pin, there's a 4-point bridle that can be used, and then the boom can actually be deployed. Use a bridle to the anchor points on each box, and that way you can then lower them to the ground. It keeps personnel from having to climb up and down on the apparatus. And quite honestly, that's one of the more challenging things that the guys go through on training is not only putting the boxes on the ground, but then putting them back onto the set pins on top of the apparatus.
Yeah, and it's going to be nice because as you talk about this, we're going to be rolling pictures of what that looks like and so on. But maximizing your real estate, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing in apparatus, maximizing space. It's nice too, because if you guys are at a prolonged incident, right? You had that trench job last night. If you had equipment in there that complement a trench rescue response, to be able to just boom those boxes off the top of the rig, put them down on the ground for accessibility, it's just a no brainer.
They didn't drop the boxes last night, but that's where we keep electric fan with ductwork that was deployed into the trench just for some fresh air movement last night and some other things because boom was deployed for a high point
Right.
mechanism. So obviously that they didn't drop the boxes after that was rigged.
Sure.
But I know personnel were out there grabbing what was needed there to support the operation.
Sure. But to be able to have that option is just huge, right? I mean, it's just, pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. It's, and so on. So,
Absolutely, which goes back to what we talked about in terms of the potential for a boat. We keep a Zodiac inflated in the station, hanging on the wall, and then the motor is sitting on a mobile mount with rollers. And there's been some discussion of adding it to that particular vehicle. A lot of departments do it, and like you said during the break, you've got a boom. Nothing says you can't deploy it straight off down to a waterway below you from a bridge or wherever you can get advantage.
yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? When launching a boat, off of a trailer at a boat ramp is nice. Is it your everyday response? Typically not. Not if it's stormwater runoff, roadway flooding, and flooded embankments with a car over the side or something. I mean, those are situations where a boat on a trailer is going to do you no good, and it's going to just take muscle to get any type of inflatable to another place other than something simple that you could back a trailer into.
Oh, absolutely. And if I can go back and touch on something too,
Yeah.
the genesis of the Fort Bend County TRT, which essentially led us to this vehicle, originally started as being a structural collapse team post 9/11. And so that then migrated into high and low angle ropes, trench, confined space, all of the other TRT disciplines. And so what you find is that the personnel that ride on this, they're not just trained in one discipline.
Right.
At least one person that is multidiscipline, whether it be the entire spectrum. In the state of Texas, there's only about 200, last I checked, a little less, what they call USAR specialists that have covered the entire gamut that TEACS, Texas A&M Engineering Service offers. And I'm proud to say that we've got 8 of them. I believe it's 8 that work for us, either in a part-time or a full-time capacity. So these guys have received all the training and are extremely fluid and extremely good at what they do.
So talk to me, Larry. What's next for you? I know, thank you for giving us a rundown tonight on Heavy Rescue 22 at a Stafford Fire Department. I appreciate you spending some time with us tonight and talking about it. I'm looking forward to putting this episode out, putting some video and pictures embedded throughout the conversation so people get a real good appreciation for what you guys have built and what you've done down there. If people have questions in regard to this build or this apparatus, where can people find you? How do they get a hold of you? And then also give me a little bit what's next for you in the apparatus world.
They can reach out through our website, www.staffordfirerescue.org. We try and be pretty diligent about keeping updated in terms of fleet changes, incident responses, and that kind of thing. Here lately, it's been a lot of specialized stuff, whether it's TIFMAS responses with the booster on deployments to West Texas and North Texas or the rescue truck. But other than that, me personally, Seaside Consultancy is my new passion project for myself, where I, like you, really enjoy apparatus and the ability to meet with people who are like-minded, and I don't claim to know everything, but I think I'm pretty well versed. And there's a lot of collaboration that can take place in terms of, making sure that people in particular with aerials understand their full capabilities, what they will and won't do. And just that's what the direction that I'm kind of moving in now. And so, like I said, the company, Seaside Consultants, and we're entering another phase, my wife is big into real estate. So if anybody needs real estate, Esther Di Camillo, subs.com. She's killing it. If you need anything in the Sugar Land area, she'll hook you up. But Seaside Consultants, I'm hoping to really get a chance to jump in there with with like-minded people who really want to utilize their apparatus to its fullest extent. That's probably the one thing that frustrates me the most. You show up on a huge incident and you have people that are hesitant to use their rigs the way they're supposed to, in particular aerials, because they truly don't understand what they will and they won't do. And I think that fundamentally, we in the fire service, we have to understand our equipment before we can utilize it to the fullest. And we can't be typical firemen. Blame it on the manufacturer of the apparatus. You know, we have ownership in that, and that it has to be able to be what, you know, we have to know what it'll do in order for it to do it.
Sure.
So I'm hoping to go in that direction.
That's great. And I know, and I endorse that 110%, because I know, you know, firsthand, that is one of my biggest things. And that's part of what we're trying to do with Apparatus Innovations is it's not only design and build and, you know, tips, tricks, and hacks of how people are doing it and what's being done from the end user all the way up to the manufacturer, but it's also designing and talking about apparatus in a way that they're designed to fulfill the functions that we need them to do. But again, they're only as good as the operator. And classes on operating apparatus, whether it's engine company operations, truck company, specialty pieces, you name it, they all are very different in their discipline. And it's important that we teach and push our people to understand the different roles in apparatus management and operation.
Oh, absolutely. And we saw that at the Joey D in the Woodlands a couple months ago that we were both at. And myself and Captain Dugan, I thoroughly enjoyed every student we came into contact with because I learned a little bit from them. They learned a little bit from us. And it was one of those things where there was some eye-opening, you know, having the opportunity to fly the mid-mounts, you know, Woodlands Tiller and some of the other 100-foot rear mounts that were there. And I think it opened up the capabilities. And there's that baseline stuff that, unfortunately, when I started driving the ladder truck in the city of Houston, I wasn't explained all of this stuff. You know, I didn't understand how an aerial ladder was engineered, what it could do and couldn't do. I had to learn that on my own. And I only learned it on my own because I didn't want to be that guy on the fire ground that didn't set it up for fear of setting it up. Yeah. And so, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, that to me is the next challenge. And quite honestly, how many $2 million fire trucks do you see show up on the fire ground? They're parked down the street because nobody wants to press it in front to use it. Right.
Right. I'm right there with you. And so I'd like to say that, you know, I wish you much success with your consulting career in that regard. And it should be said that it's C-side, as in the letter C side consultant. There it is. So, and the reason being is why, Larry?
Well, I always took great pride in our company always getting to the backside of a fire instead of being part of the parade on the front. If you can show up on another side of the building and be the first one there, you're going to be utilized and you're going to be a lot more relevant.
I love it. And with that, that's going to be a wrap for this evening. So, Larry, thank you very much. Chief of the department in Stafford, Texas, the Stafford Fire Department. Tonight's episode was about Heavy Rescue 22, which is a super unique, versatile piece of equipment that was commercially available to the fire department and put online rather quickly. And since the implementation, it has performed and exceeded expectations. So, Larry, thanks again, man. I appreciate you and your friendship and being a part of National Fire Radio's Apparatus Innovation Episode 2. I appreciate it, brother. Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite, Jeremy.
You got it, man. Hang right there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this evening. Like, follow, share. Check out National Fire Radio on all the social players. We're out there putting out good content for you, the firefighters. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.